So a huge call was made in this studio on Saturday night when the NBC News Decision Desk projected that incumbent Democratic Senator Catherine Cortez Masto kept her seat, fending off the challenge from Republican Adam Laxalt with that victory. And with that victory, Democrats managed to stay in control of the Senate. They could even expand their majority in that Georgia runoff, which is 22 days from now, but it will not be the race that decides control of the Senate. They will likely hold the Senate leadership election after that. Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is expected to keep his title. In fact, he's going to join Rachel Maddow in just the next hour, and I'm anxious to see what he has to say. What's not completely clear, not totally clear, is what happens on the other side, whether his counterpart, the still minority leader, Mitch McConnell, will keep his position as minority leader. We were set to find out Wednesday. That's when Senate Republicans hold their leadership election with several senators, including Marco Rubio of Florida, Ted Cruz of Texas, Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, calling for that vote to be delayed until after the Georgia runoff. As of now, they're not delaying it. Also uncertain is what happens to Kevin McCarthy. Now, House Republicans are meant to hold leadership elections tomorrow. There are reports that Arizona Congressman Andy Biggs, who's a far-right MAGA diehard, may challenge McCarthy, even though control of the House is still not determined at this moment. NBC News senior national political reporter Sahil Kapoor joins me right now. And Sahil, we're very used to these sorts of post-election recriminations and finger pointings among Democrats. We're seeing a little bit more among Republicans than we have over the last few elections, partly, I think, because the big lie kind of smothered that last time around. What's going on in the Senate? There is a real movement to delay these leadership elections, and more people joining, including Lindsey Graham, who I think of as like an ally of leadership. There's a huge letter signed by all these outside people, including Ginny Thomas, saying, what's going on there?
That's right, Chris, and that's largely because Republicans vastly underperformed expectations in the Senate. They were widely expecting to pick up that minimum one seat they needed to capture the majority. Now they have fallen short, and they might even end up down one seat if Democrats end up capturing Georgia in that runoff. Now, Mitch McConnell is facing the greatest threat to his leadership over his 15 years of running the Republican caucus. I say that because he's not had much of a threat at all before, and now there are 8 Republican senators who are public on the record trying to delay the leadership election. Now, that's not going to happen, according to McConnell's leadership team. They are proceeding, a few of us reporters asked him when he was making his way to the Senate floor earlier today whether he has the votes to be elected leader. He said, yeah, of course. He sounds very confident. And that confidence is with some merit, Chris, simply because this is a secret ballot election. McConnell simply needs a majority of his caucus to get, reelected leader. And, 8 is much lower of a number than the dissenters that his critics need to stop him from becoming leader. The other reason is that while people like Donald Trump blame Mitch McConnell for the Republican Party falling short, others blame Donald Trump. Some others blame Rick Scott. I spoke to one Republican senator a few hours ago, Senator Mitt Romney of Utah, and he said the blame here lies largely with Donald Trump. I want to play what Mitt Romney had to say.
Abortion played a much bigger role than we'd anticipated. I think President Trump was an albatross on the electoral prospects of some of our candidates. He helped select some of the people who turned out not to be very effective candidates. I understand he's going to run for president and announce that tomorrow. It's like the aging pitcher who keeps losing games. If we want to win, we need a different pitcher on the mound. And I know there's some fans that love him, but it's time for him to get off the mound because we have a real strong bench.
Now, Romney may be a rare Republican senator willing to say that out loud, but I can guarantee you, Chris, there are many within the party in this Capitol complex who quietly agree with him, who blame Donald Trump for the party's losses. And that's one of the reasons that McConnell is still the favorite on Wednesday to be reelected leader.
Yeah, we should say Cynthia Loomis, I think, of Wyoming, also said something about Ron DeSantis being the future of the party. I saw that today. There's a really nasty public sniping between the Rick Scott and Mitch McConnell camps, which I found really striking. They're going at each other in public. There was also a House meeting today. The House Republican Caucus had a kind of leadership forum today. What can you tell me about that?
That's right. A candidate forum, Chris, it's been going on for hours. It only recently started breaking down, and this is where candidates, make their pitch to, the room full of caucus members about why they want to be leader, why they want to be whip. The one race, of course, that everyone is watching is the race for would-be speaker if Republicans do end up capturing control of the House. I want to be abundantly clear, we have not called that yet, but our projections right now suggest that Republicans are on track to win a majority of 219 to 216. That is a wafer-thin margin that Republicans, would have if the vote goes as is currently projected, and that means Kevin McCarthy needs 218 votes on the floor of the House to become Speaker. Now, I'm no mathematician, Chris, but that's one fewer than 219, which means he has almost no margin to spare. Tomorrow is a closed-door meeting where he simply needs a majority of his caucus to be nominated Speaker. That's easy. The difficult part is getting elected Speaker on the floor of the chamber on January 3rd, and this is where a number of members coming out of the meeting told reporters today that Kevin McCarthy does not have the votes and they are not prepared to support him. That includes namely far-right members like Matt Gaetz. It includes the chair of the Freedom Caucus, Scott Perry. There are others like Bob Good of Virginia who are also not ready to support McCarthy. But there are many who are also on Kevin McCarthy's side. That includes Jim Jordan, the right-wing Republican who would be in line to chair the Judiciary Committee. Even Marjorie Taylor Greene said she's behind Kevin McCarthy because she fears that Democrats in a wafer-thin Republican majority might be able to peel off some Republicans and elect a Democratic Speaker. That's not going to happen, Chris, but it points to the end game here, which is that the rabble-rousers of the Freedom Caucus need to come up with an alternative, a viable alternative, or it just keeps going to a second and third and fourth ballot, and Kevin McCarthy would ultimately be the favorite in that situation.
Yeah, Marjorie Taylor Greene was sort of an interesting player here because it's very clear she's looking for concessions. There's also some reporting today about Trump supporting McCarthy behind the scenes. And again, all of that is about leverage, right? I mean, what the folks like Marjorie Taylor Greene and what Donald Trump want is to have a Speaker of the House that effectively they can control, right? Who owes them, who's in debt to them.
And McCarthy has anticipated this moment for a long time now, Chris, which is why he's fought to stay in Donald Trump's good graces every step of the way. He knew that Trump could make or break his potential speakership were Republicans to take control of the House because he would need the votes of many Trump-aligned lawmakers. So that's the situation right now. We don't know exactly what the concessions that they're demanding are. We know in the past that the Freedom Caucus may want things like committee assignments. They may want commitments on certain legislation that would be brought up. They may want procedural things like, legislation gets to be released X hours before a vote. They're not being particularly public about that, but this group, this faction of dozens of House Republicans does have some leverage in the sense that they have been willing to deal embarrassments to Republican leadership on the floor of the House. And that's something that Kevin McCarthy would very much like to avoid early next year, again, if he does get the majority.